It's another week in the gaming industry, which means it's another week for endlessly raging on social media about newly released video games. This time around, it's Mixtape, an adventure game developed by Beethoven and Dinosaur and published by Annapurna. This seemingly innocent coming-of-age story about some teenage friends jamming out to their favorite tunes has, for some reason, really rubbed people the wrong way. If you've had the unfortunate fate of spending any time on X the Everything app over the last week or so, you've probably seen at least one person having a borderline mental breakdown over the fact that people like it. Ironically, this insane level of controversy is the only thing that even put Mixtape on the radar for me. I probably would have skipped it entirely, but after all this madness, I had to see it for myself. So I did something that 95% of the people engaging in Mixtape Discourse have not done. It was a brave and daunting task, but through sheer grit and determination, I actually played the game. Crazy concept, right? I know it's rare these days to see a content creator play and finish a game before sharing their very strongly formed and definitive opinions with an audience, but yes folks, I've done it. Please hold your applause until the end. After braving the impossible, it leaves us with two simple questions. What did I personally think of Mixtape? And what exactly has everyone so riled up about it? I enjoy a good old interactive story game here and there. Whether it was Telltale's games, Until Dawn, or yes, even some of the Life is Strange entries, I find they can be a fun palate cleanser in between the bigger and more intense experiences. Mixtape brings a similar feeling, albeit without the choice-based branching storylines that define those other titles I just mentioned. This makes Mixtape a much looser game, one that can feel like you are kind of just along for the ride. But that isn't necessarily a demerit because it's intentional. Mixtape is not here to challenge you, it's here to let you flow through a story with some great music and pretty visuals. And in my opinion, there is something of real value you can take from a game like that. Do I want every game to be that way? Of course not. But as a different kind of experience here and there, it can be effective. In Mixtape, you play as Stacy Rockford, who is spending the last night with her two best friends before they go their separate ways after high school. Stacy has an affinity for music, putting together a mixtape of songs that the crew can listen to throughout this important day. In classic teenage movie fashion, the three friends are preparing for the biggest party of the year, trying to find alcohol, sneaking around their parents, and getting into all sorts of trouble. As they spend this day together, we are constantly sent back and forth between flashback sequences of memories the group has had together. Some positive, some negative, these flashbacks are usually introduced through interacting with items in the world or hearing certain songs, and that introduces the aspect which really differentiates Mixtape from games you've played before, its soundtrack. Featuring a medley of songs ranging from the 60s to the 90s, it places a major emphasis on licensed music, something most games steer clear of as to avoid the heavy associated fees. But Mixtape went through with that cost, allowing for stories to be told through the lens of some iconic songs that anyone of the era are sure to recognize. There is a special sort of reaction that comes from hearing a song you grew up with, allowing the player to feel the exact same nostalgic emotion as the characters. Admittedly, I was born in the early 2000s, so I don't exactly have those same memories. In fact, a lot of the songs in this track list I had never even heard before. So I would be lying if I said Mixtape brought upon the same deep emotion or even full-on tears that so many have described. But at the same time, I understand this is not necessarily a game made for me. I'm not going to sit here and complain that a game set before I was born doesn't cater to my emotions. But perhaps it's something worth keeping in mind if you are closer to my age or younger. Of course, we can all relate to childhood friendships or going our separate ways after high school, but that very specific nostalgia of the time may not be there. That's likely why some are heralding this game as a heart-wrenching masterpiece, while others see it as corny nostalgia bait. For me, it falls somewhere in between. Like I said, I don't get those same strong emotions, but I can see what they were going for. The characters are likable enough, and there were some cute moments between them. Some of the various mini-games were fun, and there were sections that definitely got a laugh out of me. It took me just about 5 hours to play through the game, platinum it, and get some additional footage for this video, making Mixtape a very short and sweet one-night experience. So definitely keep that in mind if you don't find that worthy of a $20 price point. point. Overall, I thought Mixtape was completely and utterly fine. I certainly don't regret buying and playing it. I enjoyed the music and its flashy art style. I got my share of laughs and fun, but I would also be surprised if any part of it remains on my mind a month from now. I didn't have the same emotional connection to it as some critics did, but with a game centered around an era I was not part of, that isn't all too shocking. Considering my relatively mundane reaction, you can imagine my surprise when I saw parts of the gaming community set ablaze with anger by what I would have called a fairly inoffensive game. As far as I can tell, there are three main reasons why people are so furious at Mixtape's existence. They are mad that it got extremely high and even perfect review scores from critics. They feel it is a fake independent industry plant due to its publisher and use of licensed music. And finally, they don't think it should be considered a video game because it is not interactive enough. With each of those arguments being more mind-numbingly brain-dead than the last, I almost don't even know how to begin my response. I suppose we should start with the review scores, since that is what put a ton of eyeballs on Mixtape in the first place and really jump-started this discourse. Mixtape was first announced back in 2025, and although plenty of people were excited, it wasn't exactly some high-profile release that everyone was talking about. However, once reviews came out, that quickly changed. Mixtape received high levels of praise across the board, including some perfect scores, such as the now infamous IGN 10 out of 10. It was then that the gaming community repeated a cycle they've been retreading for the last 20 years, screaming into the void about how angry they are with IGN's most recent review, while also simultaneously saying IGN's opinion is completely irrelevant. I mean, seriously, someone academic out there needs to do a case study on the obsession over IGN. For as long as I can remember reading about video games online, I can remember seeing all these same talking points about IGN being repeated over and over again. Throughout all of the different internet eras and console generations that have spanned multiple decades, one thing has always remained the same. IGN reviews really piss people off, often for very arbitrary or even totally misguided reasons. Whenever a new IGN review comes out, there is always that one guy in the comments saying, "How are you going to give this game a 10 when this game got a 7? Or how is this game only a 6 when you gave this other game a 9? It's a constant complaint that commenters seem to think is a slam dunk, but it's really not. IGN is not a human. They are not a single person cataloging and reviewing every video game that has ever been released. There are hundreds, if not thousands of different people who have reviewed games for IGN over the years. Expecting all of them to have gaming opinions that align with each other is ridiculous. Imagine someone walking into your place of work and assuming you hold the exact same principles and perspectives as all of your coworkers for no reason other than you have matching logos on your keycard. It makes no sense at all. I mean, hey, if you're unable to wrap your head around this, I can't blame you. It's not like it's been IGN's business model for the last 30 years or anything like that. They've only been reviewing games this way longer than a lot of you watching this video have even been alive, so I can see why this would still be confusing. But seriously, comparing different IGN reviews to each other that have not been written by the same person is meaningless. Now, if you want to argue that this is a bad way to review games, totally fair. I would actually agree with you there. And I think that's a big reason why individual content creators have overtaken traditional media outlets. If you're able to find someone out there who is consistent with their opinions, their thoughts on a game might hold a lot more value. Or if you watch them for a long time and notice that your tastes tend to line up with theirs, you can feel confident buying anything they recommend. I would agree you can't get that same confidence from a constantly rotating carousel of writers at IGN, but this is where the true derangement comes in. If you don't trust IGN reviews, then don't read them. Frankly, getting this worked up about any review from any source is something I have never been able to relate to. A review is inherently opinionated, so trying to argue against them is antithetical to the entire concept. Unless the reviewer is literally telling lies, like complaining about story beats that don't even happen, or pointing out gameplay mistakes that don't exist, there's literally nothing you can refute. It is entirely possible for two people to play the exact same game, or watch the same movie, and come away with completely differing reactions to it. If anything, I would argue that the ability to elicit multiple interpretations from one product is the very thing that makes some pieces of media so incredible. I guess what I'm trying to say is, not everything is some major conspiracy. The guy who reviewed Mixtape for IGN loved the game and decided he wanted to give it a perfect score. I promise you, from the bottom of my heart, there is nothing deeper to it than that. If you don't want to value their opinion, then don't. No one is forcing you to follow IGN and react to their social media posts, but again, that's the IGN cycle, which will apparently never be broken. On the topic of grand conspiracies, let's talk about the next major sticking point I've seen discussed about Mixtape, its status as an independent game. Many are taking issue with this label, questioning how an indie studio could afford all this licensed music, or delving into the connections within publisher Annapurna. Before we even get into this in regards to Mixtape, I will say I do agree that the indie label has started to lose some meaning recently. It kind of feels like any game that looks or plays a certain way is now being called indie, even when it isn't. Dave the Diver was probably the most famous example of that, where it was constantly referred to as an indie game, despite its relation to Nexon, a huge Korean gaming company. The game's director has also explicitly said he does not consider it to be an indie game, and yet everyone ignored him. It has never been able to break away from that indie label for no apparent reason other than it uses pixel art. It's fair to say we've lost the plot when it comes to what is considered indie. An independent game used to mean a self-funded small team who published their own games, aka doing everything independently. But nowadays, there are publishers who specifically seek out independent games and help them get made, such as Devolver Digital, who publish games that are unanimously considered indie. In fact, on their official website, Devolver even calls themselves an indie video game publisher. You could argue those words don't fit together, and an indie game having a publisher is a non-starter. But it's also hard to argue a game like Ball Pit, which was primarily put together by one guy, isn't an indie game simply because a publisher helped distribute it. Rather than try to find any real solution for this complicated terminology, it seems we've all kind of just accepted it as the new normal, and plenty of games with publishers or external help still get called indie. However, this debate has gained new life thanks to Mixtape and its publisher Annapurna. Annapurna is similar to Devolver, being a publisher that helps small independent games get made. But for whatever reason, Twitter users have now decided this specific case is a major problem, and that Mixtape should not be considered indie because they were clearly helped by Annapurna and their rich founding member, Megan Ellison. Megan is the daughter of Larry Ellison, aka the 6th richest person in the world. Gamers have concluded this connection means Mixtape is an industry plant being marketed as an indie despite having massive money behind it. But once again, that's a viewpoint that I find utterly insignificant. Beethoven and Dinosaur are absolutely an indie game studio. They only have around 12 active members of the team, less employees than what you might find at a local restaurant. Just because they are published by Annapurna does not change the way their team is built. And while it's easy to dunk on Megan for having an absurdly rich dad, I would say someone coming from that kind of wealth using it to help small studios get their games made is the kind of thing that we should actually be praising. To be fair, I don't know much about Megan, so maybe she's a horrible person or something, but on the surface, I would certainly rather see someone of her status funding art than pumping money into another war or AI data center. Claiming she can't be involved with a game like Mixtape because she has money, or that Mixtape can't be an indie game because they leveraged that money to afford licensed music, is another argument that I find is a total waste of time. In my opinion, this would only be a problem if they were hiding their connection to Annapurna or claiming to be self-funded, which they are not doing. Similarly, if Megan was hiding her involvement to paint a false picture about Annapurna as a company, that would also be problematic. But again, she's not doing that. It is very publicly available info that takes one Google search to find. If you feel these circumstances should disqualify them from the indie label, you are absolutely free to have that opinion. But what you're taking issue with is actually more of a problem with the terminology the gaming industry has settled on, and of no fault of Mixtape itself. So being furious with them because we as a community have decided games like this are called indie games is attacking the wrong people. Finally, the last argument I've seen online is that Mixtape should not even be considered a game, because it's basically just a movie. Once again, this is going to delve into topics that are completely unrelated to Mixtape itself, but we gotta go down this road, I guess. Part of me cannot believe that in the big year 2026, we are still having discussions about what qualifies as a video game. Didn't we already go through this whole walking simulator debate like 10 plus years ago? Back in the day, games like Gone Home or Journey got criticism for not being gamey enough, but it's a perspective I've never really understood. Sure, these games are much less interactive than than others, but they are still, by definition, video games. Are we going to say old school point-and-click adventure games are not video games? Are visual novels like Danganronpa or Doki Doki Literature Club not video games? What about Metal Gear Solid 4 with 8 hours of cinematics, including a record-long 71-minute final cutscene? From my perspective, these are stylistic and genre-based choices that create unique gaming experiences, not signs that they can no longer fit within the medium they are part of. I do acknowledge that this debate is a pretty worthless one to have. It's one of those things that people will either agree or disagree with. To someone watching this video who feels Mixtape is not a real video game, I'm not sure there is anything I can say to change your mind. But I can at the very least point out a factually inaccurate claim I've seen. One of the common statements I've seen going around social media is people saying without any hint of irony that you can play all of Mixtape without touching the controller because it's literally just a movie. So let's test that theory. I'm going to start up a new game file and see how far I can make it before I need to press a button. Well, would you look at that? Just around 8 minutes in, you cannot proceed without pressing a string of buttons. Immediately after this, the first house sequence starts, and you are officially not getting any farther without picking up the controller to move around. I'm not here to say that pressing a couple buttons or walking around a room interacting with objects is high-octane gameplay, but this needed to be highlighted because it is exactly why I think the Mixtape Discourse is so stupid. If you want to argue the game is not interactive enough, that is your right to do so. But to spread a narrative claiming you do not need to touch the controller at any point is a blatant lie that anyone who played the game past the intro title sequence would be able to immediately dispute. Why have we allowed people who have no idea what they are talking about and speak only in false hyperbole to dominate the gaming conversation in this way? Why do we live in a social media landscape where you can speak out of your ass and somehow garner a legitimate following? Any content creator who unironically said you can play through all of Mixtape without picking up the controller should never have their opinion respected again, because they just showed you they are repeating what they hear online rather than forming opinions for themselves. And there's just one last thing I want to say about this is it really a game debate. Be careful with how you try to limit entertainment and fit media into boxes. How many innovations and advancements may have never come along if we refuse to acknowledge anything slightly different as a legitimate video game? You don't want to live in a world where every creator has to play by the same defined rules, or at least I don't. If you hate games like this and can't imagine wanting to play them, I have no issue with that. But acting as if games like this can't or shouldn't exist just because you don't personally like it is an awful perspective to have. Mixtape is a game that places a major focus on emotion. Much of it relies on the nostalgia of teenage years, music, and the 90s. So is it really that hard to imagine someone reacting strongly to this game if a certain one of those themes clicks with them? Just because it may not have hit for you personally doesn't mean we need to diminish the very real experience of others. The fact that people seem unwilling or unable to do that with this game is quite concerning, and I think that's my main takeaway about the whole Mixtape situation. People have completely forgotten how to see things from a perspective different from their own. And in a gaming ecosystem with more games being released than ever before, I'm not sure why people are so hell-bent on rallying against certain games or certain kinds of games. I also think people need to decide what they even want. All I hear about is how the AAA market is so stale, all games feel the same, etc, etc. And then a game like Mixtape tries something different, and we have to suffer through a 2-week discourse about how IGN liked it too much. Some things are going to be for you, and some things just aren't. I mean, hey, I even told you earlier this game didn't really connect with me, but do you see me throwing a temper tantrum over others loving it? If for whatever reason this game truly does bother you to your core, perhaps I can offer a solution. Maybe spend all this time and energy uplifting the games you do want to see more of. Promote the games you love and encourage others to give them a try, instead of attempting to destroy a random game you haven't even played because Twitter told you to hate it. Maybe then we can have an industry that doesn't feel miserable all the time, and maybe then we can start to enjoy talking about video games again.